I swear the zipper was breathing, rising and falling in that dead, pine-heavy silence. When the last smear of daylight bled through the trees, and every bird clamped its beak shut, we thought it was the wind tickling old canvas until the metal pull tab crawled upward on its own and stuttered to a stop halfway, like a held breath deciding whether to scream. No footprints led to the tent, only a ragged halo of flattened needles and a smell like coins left under a tongue. Then the zipper slid, slow, deliberate, from the inside, teeth whispering together as if a mouth were learning to smile. Theo's camera light flicked on. The beam landed on trembling fabric. Something traced the seam. Fingertip light, tapping out a rhythm none of us wanted to know. Somewhere behind us, a twig snapped. We didn't turn. We watched the tent inhale. We told ourselves it was an animal. Something snared in the sag and snag of old nylon. Something shy of storms and men. We said it with the voices we used for bad news at family tables, soft and reasonable. Setting the lantern on low while the rain tucked itself into the canopy, and the cold began its careful climb up sleeves. The compass spun once, lazily, then slept. The needle ought to have been a little red tongue pointing home, but it liked circles tonight. Theo checked the tent seams through the viewfinder and whispered observations like he was in a chapel. Jamal drove a stake deeper and found the earth shallow and hollow, like a drum. Brooke counted steps between trees to memorize exits and found each trunk had the same 3 scratches at shoulder height. We kept talking. The tent did not. We waited for midnight's courage or morning's lie. The map said the trail looped back in 4 miles. But when Lucas traced it with a gloved finger, his fingertip found wet paper where the ink had swollen into veins. He laughed, and the sound ricocheted in the trees like a tossed coin refusing to land. Maya took the compass and watched the needle lazily orbit, as if it had found a new north in the gut of the tent. Theo filmed the zipper and caught his own breath fogging the lens in quick, guilty puffs. Jamal listened to the ground the way he used to listen to parents' footsteps, hoping to learn the future from a cadence. Brooke swore the tent shifted 2 inches closer while nobody looked. The rain ceased. The woods reset to a silence so complete it erased the memory of birds. When the zipper moved again, a polite, testing tick. Every throat swallowed at once. We found the ranger log in a biscuit tin under a cairn, the lid soldered by rust and patient weather. Jamal cracked it open with a flat rock, and the smell was mousy, papery, old rain made of dust. Inside were 3 pages dates from late autumn, a list of warnings in a tight, unshowy hand, and a single sentence copied 4 times as if repetition were a fence. Do not answer when it asks. Theo read it, laughed without humor, and pointed the camera at our faces like a mirror. Names filled the margins, crossed out initials, circles around certain trees on a sketched map, an X over the exact shape of this clearing. Brooke turned the last page and found a fingerprint in something darker than ink. Smudged where a thumb had trembled, the zipper ticked again, like a question mark learning patience. Night finally arrived like a decision. We arranged ourselves in a ragged circle facing the tent, lantern crouched between boots, as if it were a hearth we'd earned. The forest settled its weight onto our shoulders and the cold rehearsed its small cruelties. Maya counted breaths to keep her hands steady. Theo set the camera on a tripod and let the red tally light blink like a patient eye. Brooke rested her chin on her knees, lips pressed thin. Jamal tested knots on the guy lines and threaded paracord around the zipper tab. A simple leash for a complicated thing. Lucas told a joke about bears and got halfway through before losing the ending. Then, from inside the tent, a voice shaped itself out of air. Not one of ours, not a stranger's. Something that sounded like 2 people speaking through the same mouth at the same time. It said a name. It said, "Please." The voice folded back into the cloth like smoke, and what remained was a hunger that made the air thin. We killed the lantern to test a theory and the forest closed its fist. In the sudden dark, the tense nylon ticked with the tiny contract and release of cooling fabric, an insect heartbeat learning human rhythm. Theo's camera stuttered a glitch, red light smearing into a tail as if dragged by fingers. The compass shivered and pointed at the zipper. Something pressed out against the seam, an oval no wider than a face, and the teeth strained, bright in the camera's ghost glow. Jamal looped the paracord twice more, not because it would hold, but because hands needed work. Brooke started counting backward from a number she never reached. Lucas whispered that storms pass and got corrected by the leaves, which lifted without wind. From inside, a second breath joined the first, like an echo choosing to arrive early. When the electronics failed, headlamp dimming to a bruise, camera screen veining with dead pixels, the forest finally found its voice. Not birds, not animals. Words. They came from canvas, from bark, from the wet mouths of leaves, each syllable a practiced imitation sharpened on our breath. It said hello, the way a locked door says it to a burglar. It tried our names. Wrong, at first like misbuttoned shirts, then closer, almost right, until it sounded like someone we would forgive. Jamal planted himself between the zipper and the rest of us, a wall of quiet. The ground softened underfoot, soil giving like a held tongue. Brooke's gaze snapped to the tree line where a second tent shape seemed to be pitched by darkness alone, angles without fabric. Lucas joked about phantom camps and choked on the ending again. The zipper sighed down a single tooth, as if amused by our attention. Maya found claw marks not on the trunks, but inside the circle where no animal should have dared. 3 parallel gouges raked into a stone slick with moss. The grooves were shallow yet wide, as if made by something thin and patient. Theo filmed the discovery, and the camera recorded a shadow, where none of us stood, a long-limbed angle leaning over the shot. We all saw it later. We all pretended not to then. The zipper tugged against its leash twice, playful as a cat with a string. From the trees came the rustle of something leggy, testing leaves for music. "Brooke," said. Her name came from inside the tent in her mother's voice, and had to hold her teeth together to keep her answer from escaping. Lucas traced routes on air that didn't exist. Jamal counted knots, then started again. Above us, the sky forgot to move. We tried reason like a spell. If it was trapped, we would call for help at first light. If it was dangerous, we would leave without curiosity's tax. If it was neither, the woods would decide. The voice disagreed by borrowing gentler mouths. It said a pet's name one of us hadn't spoken in years. It quoted a joke from a bar in a town far from here. It made promises about warm kitchens and forgiving doors. Each syllable brushed the canvas and left a darker patch, as if inked by breath. Theo lifted the lens and it fogged from the inside. Jamal's knot bit his wrist and drew a thin bracelet of blood, which the tent smelled like a smile. Brooke whispered that something was circling, but not with feet. The night itself orbited us in wide, patient arcs. Lucas held a lighter, flames stuttering, and swore he felt wind inside his mouth. The shape finally showed itself without showing itself at all. Theo's camera captured an imprint pressing outward a long hand. Too many joints, palms shaped like a question mark. Fingers tasting the coal. It tapped a rhythm that Maya recognized a second before panic. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. The old code from her childhood bedroom door when nightmares wanted company. The zipper tugged once, gentle as a request. Jamal told us not to speak and swallowed his own name when it tried to escape his throat. Brooke bit the inside of her cheek until she could taste pennies. Lucas began to count trees and lost track at the same number twice. The tent exhaled a thread of warmth that smelled like someone we missed. The pull tab ticked down a tooth, and then up 2, learning. Above us, a crow chose not to call, and the silence made a space big enough to step into. The tent began to court us. It timed its breathing to ours, finding the leader, stealing cadence, thinning resolve with the suggestion of ease. The pull tab rose, fell, rose, like a lure. The one with jokes kept his palms open as if to show he held nothing dangerous except impatience. A thread of warmth seeping from the seam smelled like winter kitchens and drying socks, like every mercy we hadn't earned. Someone whispered that we should look, just a little, a slit the width of a coin. The paracord tightened until it sang. The camera's red eye counted seconds like a metronome teaching a song we didn't want to learn. When the nylon quivered, the clearing seemed to tilt, and we felt the night choose a direction. The zipper clicked one tooth higher with a sound like a polite knock on a hospital door, and something inside leaned close enough to wrinkle the canvas. The argument arrived in whispers because the forest taxed volume. Curiosity framed itself as rescue. Caution framed itself as math. If it could learn our rhythm, it could learn our doors. The Joker said a slit would settle it and mimed the motion with 2 fingers, a harmless pantomime that still made everyone flinch. The tallest among us became a gate with his body, rope locked to his wrist, mouth alive. The one who trusted maps stared at trees that refused to arrange themselves into exits. The one who kept records filmed and pretended the lens was a shield. Then the canvas pressed outward with the deliberate patience of a palm testing ice. The zipper jerked against its leash and stopped. The clearing held its breath until the breeze finally remembered itself, a thin, directionless draft that moved not the branches, but the hair along our arms. It called in a voice that knew where our tenderness lived. Not names this time, but memories trimmed of their edges, small domestic rituals spoken through cloth, a porch light left on, a dog's collar shaking, a kettle finishing its sentence. The promise was simple, just look. The one who counted knots kept counting. The recorder whispered the warning line from the log, as if a prayer that didn't require belief to function. The Joker, cornered by his own bravado, set his thumb and forefinger to the metal and paused. And in that pause, the tent exhaled a damp heat that fogged his skin. The paracord hummed. The flap twitched twice, playful. Somewhere, far off, water moved without a river. We gathered closer against a cold that wasn't temperature, a freezer burn kind of dread that rides light. The zipper shifted a fraction, and the breath behind it sweetened into imitation. Or no, sweetened into imitation. The slit happened because the universe rewards persistence. A fraction, no more than a thumbnail's width, and the smell that leaked out wasn't rot or musk, but something like a raincoat turned inside out, ozone and plastic and mouth. The recorder caught a glimpse the others missed. Dark on dark, an absence with joints, a suggestion of a hand arranged wrong, digits discovering angles beyond habit. The tallest yanked the cord and the flap jumped back, teeth chattering as if the tent had remembered what closing meant. The thing inside responded with patience, pressing a talon along the seam from ankle height to shoulder and back again, learning our shape. The Joker tried to turn a joke into a breath and failed. The warning line lived in our throats, dry as paper. We felt the clearing rotate a degree, aligning us with something we hadn't chosen to meet. It learned her voice perfectly. Not just the tone, but the pauses, the small breath she takes before a dare, the quaver she hides with sarcasm. When it spoke from the cloth, the vowel curled exactly right, and every defense we owned reached for the answer it wanted. Silence became a discipline stitched between teeth. The tallest bound the pull tab to a stake, double, then triple, until his wrist bled anew. The blood made the fabric smile with heat. The Joker backed away and found the forest had moved while we were busy. Trunks had crept inward like an audience. The recorder lowered the camera because some things shouldn't be watched, only endured. The runner mouthed the warning again without sound. Inside, a taloned hand tested the seam one last time and then withdrew, not defeated, but invited to wait. When the zipper finally went still, the woods applauded with a wind that touched nothing. We dug because the ground kept sounding hollow when Jamal tapped it. A drumhead stretched under needles. The cairn's base gave like a tooth, and beneath the first layer of stones lay a rectangle of canvas stiff with old mud. Maya slid it open with the multi-tool and freed a field kit stamped with a ranger badge, so rubbed it was more memory than emblem. Inside, a whistle gone green, a coil of black tape, a dictaphone wrapped in waxed cloth, and a pencil stub chewed to splinters. The tape's first inches were scarred with repeated play. Theo's thumb hovered, then pressed. Static rose like moths in a jar. A man's voice arrived, tired and careful, each word carried across a brittle bridge. Dates, patrol routes, notes on missing hikers who answered things no one asked. Then a phrase like a thorn snagged us all at once. Borrowed mouth. And the tent felt closer without moving. The dictaphone spoke as if the speaker had learned to be quiet in rooms with thin walls. He cataloged scratches on bark, the geometry of clearings that drifted at night, tents that breathed when no one was inside. He described staking the zipper shut and teaching rookies not to answer when canvas knocked. We listened with the obedience of children punished in advance. Then the voice changed on the tape mid-sentence, not pitch so much as posture. His vowels lengthened, consonants softened, like a mouth-testing fit. It said his own name twice, and sounded wrong both times. Jamal's fingers tightened around the paracord until it squeaked. Brooke stared at the tent and whispered that the word mouth had never sounded so crowded. Maya rewound a few seconds and we heard it happen again, the same syllable wearing two faces. Theo's lens recorded our silence, and the forest leaned in, greedy for repeat plays. The tape turned practical the way fear sometimes does. The ranger listed rules in the same tone you teach a child to cross a road. Don't mirror its rhythm. Don't return a greeting. Don't offer a name you mean to keep. If it borrows your mouth, shut it out with noise you hate. His breath rasped, and we could hear rain that might have been this rain. A loop that never ended. Then the recorder caught something else. Faint, like fabric cupping a whisper. Another voice rode his, not layered, but weaving. A braid that wanted a single strand. It asked for light, and called light by a truer word we did not know until our teeth ached. The tent ticked. The zipper tugged once, twice, timing itself to the tape's playback as if practicing. Lucas shut the recorder off, and the dark around us flexed, insulted by the interruption. The black tape in the kit looked like hazard line without color. Wrapped around a paper tag, use this when it asks, was a spool of blankness matte as ash. Maya tore a strip and pressed it to the tent where the fabric had begun to darken with warm breath. The canvas cooled under her palm as if the tape were a lid closing on a pot. The relief was brief. From farther around the circumference came a new warmth rising, a ring of lips learning location. The tape could smother one mouth, not the rest. Brooke found, under the kit's false bottom, a scrap of map marked with a narrow gully and a symbol that might have been a river or a warning. Theo said the ranger meant us to move, and the woods answered, a pressure difference more than a wind, like waking in a room where the window has been opened, but the curtains forgot to lift. We followed the ranger's scrawl because nothing else felt like choice. The gully was a seam in the earth stitched with roots, narrow enough that shoulders brushed clay. The farther we stepped from the tent, the more the night argued to keep us. Branches found zippers and tugged. Stones rolled just as ankles committed. The dictaphone clicked on by itself in Theo's pocket and played a final note. If you must bargain, bring it to moving water. We couldn't see a stream, but we heard a hush like a throat clearing. Behind us, the tent resumed its slow breathing, patient as tide. Jamal kept the paracord leash looped, dragging a thin line through needles, as if it might count as tether. Brooke whispered the warning line and got it wrong the first time. The forest corrected her with a chorus of leaves. Ahead, the dark lightened to a smear, and the air learned to smell like stone. The gully delivered us to a lip of stone where the forest fell away, and the air smelled like metal and breath. Somewhere below, unseen water kept its own counsel. A constant hush, like fabric, being folded forever. The paracord went taut, with a will of its own, lines zigzagging back into the trees, as if something stronger had taken hold of the other end. We turned as one and saw the clearing had moved to meet us. The tent waited 30 paces uphill where no clearing had been, canvas swollen, stakes skittering over needles like teeth in a jar. The zipper's leash snapped with a soft, satisfied sound. Nylon ballooned, then inverted, as if the tent were being pulled inside out by a lung that lived in the dark. A seam ripped, a sigh escaped, and winter spilled from the opening. Something jointed uncoiled against the night, thin as rumor, long as a lie, and the first voice it borrowed sounded like home, saying, "Come back." It did not rush. It unfolded the way darkness tries on a room, finding corners, learning thresholds. The first limb tasted the ground and shied from lantern ember. The second arced around the light with a dancer's care, and a spider's mathematics. We heard it before we knew its shape, the delicate pop of seams resigning, the whisper of nylon becoming useless, the precise click of zipper teeth closing on nothing as if practicing a smile. Then it spoke with perfect thoughtlessness, choosing a familiar cadence and putting it on wrong by a hair's width. It asked for help, and the help sounded like warmth and old blankets and a drive after rain with the windows down. We did not answer, but the refusal cost us breath. The gully gave a tiny echo, a promise of water somewhere close. The thing leaned toward that promise and toward us in the same motion, as if our names and the river were two methods for the same door. The second voice was exact. It had the pauses of a message left at midnight, the small swallow after a promise, the throat wet of a person who has cried and will insist otherwise. It called a name and put history behind it, years compressed into syllables like frost pressed into glass. Brooke's face collapsed and rebuilt in a heartbeat. The sound was a key that had once belonged to her. Jamal whispered the rule, and she clamped both hands over her mouth. The thing leaned at the sound of restraint, the way a cat leans into a closing door. Theo shot blind, lens averted, letting the recorder drink the air instead. Lucas took a step toward the trees that were not where they had been, and found every trunk in agreement about his shape. The gully exhaled, a hidden current, through the barest cool across our shins. The creature tilted, as if listening to something older than us, pulling its leash. The breach finished like a burr through the wrong door. Canvas peeled, poles bowed as if apologizing, and a torso-shaped absence pushed free, jointed along places no anatomy textbook had reserved. Where a face should have been, there was arrangement without commitment, features trying on, discarding, choosing again. It turned toward each of us in sequence, wearing the expression we would most forgive. When it found the one that hurt the least to look at, it kept it. Then it moved, quick as thought and twice as confident, and the camp shattered into motion. We broke formation, instinct scattering us into the geometry of flight. The thing followed not feet but breath, selecting whichever exhale shook. Jamal barked a single syllable that wasn't a word and made himself a wall. The river's hush gathered into direction. We understood the tape's promise moving water might be the one mouth it couldn't borrow. We ran the way animals remember how, heads low, arms tight, feet inventing ground. The forest tried to keep us by moving sideways, trunks adjusted an inch. Roots lifted their edges, paths arrived, then thought better of it. The creature did not chase so much as collect, appearing where our fear pointed, always a shoulder ahead. It spoke while it moved, cycling through voices like stations, tuning toward whichever syllable broke a person cleanly. The river declared itself at last, not by sight but by temperature. Air sharpened, breath smoked, the earth sloped into sound. Stones gave underfoot and kept their balance anyway. Jamal kept the thing's attention the way thunder keeps a dog's, loud and present, taking the bite meant for the pack. Theo flung his camera into shadow as if it were bait, and the red tally light sailed, a foxfire bobbing the creature's gaze toward the water's unseen edge. The river revealed itself as a band of breathing fog, the sound not splash but syllables smoothed by stone. We learned its rule by accident when we spoke. The thing leaned. When we held our breath, it hesitated, like a thief confronted by a mirror. Maya tested a longer silence, swallowing even the urge to gasp, and the creature's chosen face thinned, starved of her shape. It wanted the steam our mouths made in cold, and the names that rode that steam like lanterns on a canal. Jamal splayed his fingers and signed what he could remember from old drills. Quiet, together, now. While Brooke pressed her tongue to her palate to trap words. The tense husk slumped above like a torn flag, but the night had dragged a road to our feet, slick stones stepping into black current. The thing paced the bank, measuring crossings we could not see. We decided together without sound, the river would judge us first. It tried a bargain in the grammar of mercy. It promised warmth if we gave a word. Any word, any small down payment of identity to prove the bridge would hold. The river disagreed with a louder hush, proving that movement can be a voice. Maya reached into her pack and came up with smooth stones, pressing one to each tongue. A childhood cure for chatter made into ritual. The world narrowed to nose breath and heartbeat. Even fear had to move quietly. The creature's edges unraveled, recomposed, testing what shape survived when denied the scaffolding of syllables. Theo raised the recorder and let the river fill it until the levels peaked, a wet wall of sound to stuff in any borrowed mouth. Brooke closed her eyes and imagined a throat closing around a pine cone, a trick she'd used to swallow tears. Jamal counted with pulses in his wrist. Lucas stared at the current and learned it by its rhythm, not its look. The first test was simple. Take 3 steps into water. Do not speak if it touches the knees. Return if it climbs higher. The creature followed parallel along the bank, an obedient shadow daring us to inhale. Maya entered first. The cold reached bone in a single breath that she refused to take. Her lungs burned a bright, precise pain that taught her the measure of herself. The thing leaned for the steam that didn't come and faltered, as if footing failed on a floor none of us could see. Jamal went next, shoulders squared, jaw set, a wall migrating into the river. Brooke's teeth clicked once. The sound drew the knot face like a needle to blood and then dissolved as she swallowed it whole. Lucas counted, lost count, started again, and kept moving. Theo remained at the rim, weighing which part of him the dark wanted most, then slipped the camera strap from his neck like a necklace being given away. The trade presented itself when the thing finally spoke without mimicry. The voice was thin as paper and older than error, asking not for words but for the red eye that watched, light disciplined into witness, the hunger it feared. It wanted the camera. It wanted to close the eye that made it a subject. Theo understood in the space between heartbeats. He raised the DSLR, its tally light a wounded ember, and hit record so the sensor glowed as generously as it could. The creature swayed, greedy for that heat. Theo kissed the mic foam like you'd bless a reliquary, then turned and hurled the camera past the midstream shimmer where current seized anything named. The arc borrowed moon and made a comet of plastic and glass. The impact cracked like a knuckle. The river gulped the red light down to a pin and then to nothing. The thing made a thin sound like a hinge forgetting its task. Silence took sides. With the red eye drowned, the creature's faces went out like runes losing power, one by one. Deprived of witness and steam, it thinned until the forest showed through it in trembling slices. The river's voice swelled, filling the gaps where language might have lived, and our names felt heavier in our mouths. Valuable again, locked behind stone and discipline. We crossed in a staggered line, hands skimming shoulders, feet memorizing slick maps of rock. Behind us, the tense husk folded slowly, like a lung learning modesty. The thing tried one last theft, reaching for Brooke with a gasp shaped like relief. But the water carried the sound away and returned it as meaningless weather. On the far bank, the world smelled like ironwork and fern. We knelt as if permission had to be earned on both sides. Theo's empty hands shook. He pressed them flat to the stones until the trembling had somewhere else to live. Dawn did not break so much as seep, a gray dilution that turned the river from a voice into a habit. On our bank, the stones held the nights cold like grudges, and breath rose in patient columns that we counted without meaning to. Across the water, the thing kept the shape it had decided we could survive. Thinner than fog, yet stubbornly outlined where it refused to learn river. It tried a final grammar, not voices this time, but arrangements. Our silhouettes standing, kneeling, turning, each gesture borrowed and returned wrong by a degree. Maya whispered with her hands that we should keep still, and stillness became a rope. Theo stared at his empty fingers as if they were a camera, learning to be skin again. Brooke pressed her teeth together until the ache outshouted memory. Jamal watched the current pick its lanes and marked the swiftest with his eyes. The woods waited like an audience that knows the ending and loves the pain of it anyway. It found a better lure than names, promises shaped like chores we owed. It offered safe passage back to the trail, if we would speak for one of us. Just a small pronunciation to mark a path. The river made rebuttal with a lifted spray and an eddy that wrote circles on itself. We understood the arithmetic too late. If it could not take from breath in motion, it could take from a ledger of debts. Theo looked up river, down river, then at the husk of camp just visible through trees. A molting skin the forest would keep as a museum. He shook his head once, and the shape across the water mirrored the denial with glee. Jamal's eyes went to the bank where rocks sloped easy, calculating angles and costs. Brooke whispered nothing behind her teeth. Lucas cracked a lighter and got blue, then nothing. The offer hung like a bead of water on a branch, heavy enough to drop, pretty enough to stare at. The price announced itself the way a splinter announces infection. Small, bright, suddenly central. Theo unclipped the recorder, the last eye he owned, and let the river speak into it until hiss became roar. He turned to us and mouthed that a bridge needs weight. We shook our heads because the story of survival always chooses someone, and we had not consented to endings yet. The thing swayed like a sapling in wind. It alone could feel. Hungry for a syllable shaped like surrender. Maya held Theo's gaze and tapped a rhythm on her knee. 3, pause, 2. The code from childhood he had filmed in the tent. He nodded as if a door had finally explained itself. Jamal stepped half into the water to widen our line. Brooke reached for Theo's sleeve and found the air instead. Lucas said no without sound, a throat shape that still left a debt. The creature leaned. The river lifted its voice. The moment took on weight specific to bridges. He gave it a name with edges blunted, a nickname no one else used, and the river stole the sound before the creature could wear it. Still, the thing leaned, catching the heat of intention like hands near coals. Theo raised the recorder, hit play, and flooded the world with current so wide it felt like weather hurrying through our bones. Over the roar, he formed the shape of goodbye without letting air through it. And then he stepped from the bank as if the stones knew him. The creature matched, pacing onto its own mirror water that did not exist. It faltered where his wake crossed, a geometry error, becoming pain. Theo kept moving until the river claimed his footing, then angled downstream, drawing the hunger with him like a magnet pulls filings. Jamal braced us. Maya took Brooke's shoulders and turned her away from the middle. Lucas watched the downstream bend for a shape and rehearsed the word. Stay in a place. Words couldn't go. The end was not grand, only exact. Theo reached the eddy where the current changed its mind and stepped sideways into depth that signed its intent with a single cold hand. He did not shout. The recorder slipped, bobbed once, and vanished under a fold of water, the roar abruptly becoming river again. The creature lunged for the sound's ghost, and encountered judgment instead. Where wake crossed, wake it tore, like paper lit from within. Faces going out, angles sagging. It tried to borrow one last mouth, and found only spray. Maya counted heartbeats past the number fear allows, and then pulled us up the bank in a single command made of touch. On the far side, the forest let morning in by degrees. The clearing returned to its rightful coordinates, and the tent we had left behind reassembled in the mind like a warning sign no one would collect. We did not speak until trees learned to make shadows again.